when I returned home and found 15 strangers partying on my family's private waterfront, led by Sandra Hayes, the HOA queen who'd been telling the entire neighborhood that my property belonged to them. When I confronted her, she called 911 on me, claiming I was stealing community land. But here's where everything flipped. Digging into county records revealed she'd already tried, and failed, to get legal rights to my land years ago. She knew the truth. She hid it. And then, it got darker. Sandra had taken $16,000 of HOA funds, told everyone negotiations were in progress, and then used forged government documents to convince a developer to invest $225,000 in a fake, exclusive waterfront club on my estate. She was planning to make over $300,000 a year from land she didn't own. I gathered every document, every lie, every forged letter, and exposed her at a packed HOA meeting. People who once cheered for her watched in shock as her entire scheme collapsed. She tried to run. Too late. Now she's facing charges for fraud, embezzlement, and trespassing, while my family's land stays exactly where it belongs. Because sometimes the only thing more powerful than corrupt authority is the truth in the right hands. This gate stays locked. You can scream about rights all day, but this land belongs to me. Those exact words triggered an absolute meltdown from Sandra Hayes, HOA board president, standing inches from my face while dialing 911 because I wouldn't unlock my family's inherited waterfront property for her unauthorized gathering of 15 strangers. The absurdity hit hard. Neighbors actually clapping while patrol cars rolled up, treating me like the criminal for defending a 4.1-acre estate my grandpa purchased back in 1952. Sandra radiated this unshakable confidence about owning access to land that predated her entire subdivision by 4 decades. What made her so absolutely certain? When I finally dove into the official county archives, what surfaced completely inverted everything. Ever dealt with HOA power trips? Sandra, this saga is unbelievable. It launched that Saturday dawn around 9:45 a.m. I'd only stepped out maybe 90 minutes for supplies when I swung onto Riverside Terrace and spotted gray plumes climbing above the pines surrounding my waterfront. Voices carried through morning air, that relaxed laughter people make when they assume total permission. My knuckles went white gripping leather. Rolling into my driveway, the scene froze me. 15 bodies, ice chests everywhere, camping seats unfolded, Bluetooth speaker pumping 80s hits, and commanding center stage with folded arms like she held the title deed herself stood Sandra Hayes. Our first encounter happened 3 weeks back after inheriting Uncle Robert's estate. She'd appeared unannounced clutching her signature binder, explaining that although my residence technically existed outside HOA jurisdiction, I should still embrace being cooperative and respect their community standards. I'd politely passed. Now she was orchestrating what resembled a full neighborhood cookout on my inherited land. I activated my camera app and hit record, walking downslope. Charcoal smoke reached me first, followed by spinning fishing drag sounds. Pardon the interruption, I projected, maintaining measured tone. Private estate here. Everyone exits now. Music kept thumping. Couple heads turned briefly. Most continued grilling, chatting, casting lines. Sandra rotated deliberately, that icy grin spreading. She was 54, platinum hair severe, sporting a Carl blazer. Mr. Brennan, she announced for her audience. Perfect timing. This waterfront serves as designated shared amenity space. Phone stayed recording. This waterfront sits entirely on my titled property. You're committing trespass. She chuckled and scanned her supporters. That's your misunderstanding. Lakeview residents have accessed this resource for years. Inheriting adjacent real estate doesn't grant ownership over communal waters. I'd practiced real estate law 17 years before early retirement. Sandra's playbook was textbook. Intimidation through mob consensus. Flipping you into the antagonist role. Can you produce documentation establishing HOA easement rights? I asked directly. Sandra's expression flickered momentarily. I don't owe you proof. All records exist. I zoomed tighter. Then sharing those records shouldn't challenge you. Meanwhile, immediate evacuation required. Some guy manning the barbecue advanced. Seriously, dude? We're just relaxing. Don't create drama. I faced him squarely. I'm not creating anything. I'm the landowner enforcing property boundaries. Sandra grabbed her mobile Fine. Police are coming. You're harassing community members exercising legitimate access. I nearly grinned. Absolutely. Please do. Officer documentation of trespassing would be helpful. 23 minutes later, cruiser arrived. Deputy Carlos Martinez stepped out. Old classmate from decades back. Sandra rushed him instantly, talking rapid fire, waving toward me. Phrases like aggressive property hoarding and denying neighborhood heritage floated over. Carlos listened, then approached. Michael Brennan. Long time. Handshake exchanged. Carlos, apologies for weekend interruption. He surveyed the crowd. Situation overview? Kept it factual. Grandpa purchased this acreage 1952. 4.1 acres total. Inherited 6 months back. 0 permissions ever granted. Returned from errands finding these individuals trespassing. Ms. Hayes claims HOA holds rights, but provides no supporting documents. Carlos flipped notepad open. Ms. Hayes, do you possess recorded easement agreements or legal instruments demonstrating HOA access authorization? Sandra's complexion deepened. I don't transport files everywhere, but they're archived officially. Carlos looked my direction. Your title deed available? PDF pulled up instantly. Right here. County recorded. 0 encumbrances. 0 shared provisions. Carlos examined thoroughly. Return device. Ma'am, absent documentation. Mr. Brennan's within rights. This constitutes private ownership. Sandra's jaw worked soundlessly. This is ridiculous. We absolutely have standing. Carlos stayed professional. Then produce evidence. Currently, everyone must vacate. The gathering began slow. Resentful movement. Chairs collapsed with metallic clangs. One lady shot daggers. You're seriously doing this over water access? I remained silent. Sandra idled by her sedan, boring holes through me. You'll regret this decision. I represent an entire community. You're isolated. One person with legitimate title beats a mob without paperwork. She slammed her door. Tires spitting gravel. I returned to the waterfront, surveying damage. Trash scattered everywhere. Torn warning sign. Cigarette butts contaminating shoreline. Phone out. I dialed Thomas Carr, sharpest real estate attorney I knew. Michael. Saturday morning. This better justify interruption. Smiled despite frustration. Tom, remember when I predicted retirement would bore me senseless? He groaned audibly. What happened now? Stared at rippling water. Just antagonized my HOA president. Pretty confident she's plotting retaliation. Tom went quiet. Need complete county record pull? Thought about Sandra's rock-solid certainty claiming legal standing. Yeah, everything. Deeds, easements, HOA incorporation filings. I want knowing exactly what she thinks she possesses. Tom's tone shifted. Monday delivery. Meanwhile, avoid stupidity. I laughed. Define stupid in my context? He chuckled. With your history? Can't confidently. Call ended. Stood absorbing my waterfront view. Grandpa brought me here age 7. Teaching casting technique. He'd bought this ground with savings from double shifts. Now some board president thought she could commandeer it with attitude and clipboards. Retrieved the vintage gate key. Securing the iron barrier Grandpa installed 60s era. Hung fresh signage. Private estate. No trespassing. Violators face prosecution. Then settled on my deck. Laptop open. Sudden urge reviewing Texas statutes, chapter 30.05 regarding criminal trespass definitions. Sandra's overconfidence always conceals something buried, and I intended uncovering precisely what. Sunday dawn. Discovered an envelope taped on my entrance. No postage. No sender. Just my name in aggressive block letters. Inside. Single page bearing HOA letterhead. Violation notice. Denial of community resource access. You are notified that actions dated November 4th constitute breach of shared resource protocols. Immediate compliance mandated or litigation follows. Signed, Sandra Hayes. Board President. Read twice. Cross-checked my deed timestamp. 1952. 41 years before this HOA incorporation existed. Brewed coffee. Settled on the deck watching sunrise paint the water copper. This was supposed to be peaceful retirement. Sandra was manufacturing conflict trying to absorb me into her little empire. How far would she push? By 10:15 a.m., noticed something strange. Vehicles creeping past, not stopping, just crawling. Drivers rubbernecking toward my estate. One woman actually photographed from her window. Walked to mailbox. Encountered my 2 houses down neighbor Gerald checking his delivery. Morning, I offered. He glanced, quickly averted. Morning. Voice clipped. Uncomfortable. Met Gerald initially moving in. Seemed friendly. His wife brought casserole. Everything all right? I asked. Gerald shifted weight. Look, I avoid entanglements. But you should know, people are talking. Sandra blasted the entire neighborhood last night. Said you threatened community members. Weaponized police against families enjoying shared property. Jaw muscles tightened. That's fabricated. He raised his palm. Just relaying what's circulating. My wife's in Sandra's circle. I'd stay low if I were you. He retreated without further exchange. Inside. Laptop open. If Sandra was spinning narratives, I needed understanding what I faced. Next 2 hours diving county archives. Cross-referencing everything connected to my acreage. Original 1952 deed was crystal clear. Walter Brennan, my grandfather, purchased 4.1 acres including waterfront for $9,000. Survey blueprint showed precise perimeters. Comparing current HOA subdivision layout. The waterfront sat completely beyond HOA boundaries, separated by nearly 250 feet of undeveloped buffer. No easement language, no access covenants, nothing. Then I located what mattered. 3 years prior, Sandra had filed petitions with county planning commissioners requesting recreational easement for Lakeview Residents Association. She'd attached testimonial letters from residents claiming years of uncontested usage. Planning board reviewed title, conducted hearings, and rejected the petition outright. Decision documentation was explicit. Petitioner fails demonstrating any legal foundation for easement claim. Property in question remains privately held with zero history of sanctioned public or collective access. Rejection dated November 21st. 2 years ago. I leaned back, stomach nodding. Sandra knew she'd attempted gaining legal access and failed, but never disclosed that outcome to community members. Stared through glass at the waterfront. Sunlight dancing across ripples like diamonds. Beautiful, tranquil, but underneath, Sandra's calculated deception. Kept digging. Found meeting minutes from HOA session months ago discussing community enhancement to boost valuations. Proposal mentioned creating recreational zone with waterfront access as cornerstone attraction. Budget allocation for access rights acquisition totaling $16,000. That figure stuck. My mobile rang. Tom Carr. Got your records, he said, voice carrying weight. Michael, this gets interesting. Sandra Hayes attempted purchasing easement rights from your uncle 3 years back. Offered $16,000. He refused flat. Same amount in HOA budget. She'd been orchestrating this extended campaign. Tom continued. And there's more. Located correspondence last year between Sandra and developer named Richard Stone. She was marketing waterfront access as component of private membership club proposal. Cold certainty washed through. She's attempting profiting from my land. Tom went silent briefly. That's what it looks like. And if she convinced the HOA funding it, she might face deeper trouble than simple trespassing. Gazed at the waterfront. Peaceful. Still. Tom, I need everything. Every filing. Every petition. Every communication between Sandra and county offices. If she's been deceiving the HOA about holding rights to my estate, they deserve truth. Tom agreed. Complete report tomorrow. Meanwhile, document everything. She contacts you, record it. After hanging, walk down to water's edge. Sandra's confidence suddenly made complete sense. She'd invested years constructing this narrative, convincing neighbors they held rights to this location, all while knowing county officials had already denied her petition. She transformed me into the villain disrupting her carefully constructed lie. A lie she was using for personal financial gain. But here's what she miscalculated. I'd invested 17 years in courtrooms handling people who thought they could manipulate truth to serve their agenda, and I was just getting started. Monday morning, Tom called exactly 8 a.m. I've compiled everything, he said, papers rustling audibly. Sandra Hayes has been extremely busy. Speaker mode. Coffee poured. Tell me. Tom confirmed everything I had found plus additional layers. Here's where it escalates. Located correspondence between Sandra and someone named Richard Stone, CEO of Stone Development Partners, company specializing in premium recreational facility development. They've been negotiating over a year about creating something called the Riverside Exclusive Club. Set coffee down carefully. Exclusive club on my waterfront? Tom's voice carried restrained anger. According to email chains, Sandra pitched the waterfront as premium feature attracting high-value memberships. She told Stone the HOA had established access rights and sought partnership. Stone was interested enough to deposit funds, $225,000. My stomach dropped. $225,000? Tom stayed silent momentarily. Michael, Sandra wasn't just claiming your waterfront for community benefit. She was monetizing access to it. Does the HOA know any of this? I asked. Tom was quiet. That's the issue. I checked meeting records spanning 3 years. Sandra never mentioned Stone, never disclosed the club proposal, never revealed the deposit. Far as the HOA understands, they approved $16,000 for general access improvements, moved to window overlooking the water. Morning sun struck at an angle making it shimmer like mercury. My grandfather worked double jobs buying this land. Now Sandra Hayes thought she could commercialize it, converting it into a private revenue stream. What else? I asked, phone humming faintly. Tom shuffled more documents. Sandra's been sloppy. She utilized personal email for communications, and Stone's firm maintains meticulous documentation. I found marketing blueprints they drafted together describing the waterfront as exclusive 4.1-acre private sanctuary with projected annual membership dues of $55,000 for up to 18 families. That's nearly $1 million yearly revenue. Sandra was planning 32% management commission. Do the math. $320,000 annually. That's what Sandra stood earning if she succeeded. No wonder she'd projected such confidence. She'd already spent Stone's deposit mentally, already constructed her empire in imagination. All she required was my waterfront. One more thing, Tom said, voice dropping. I contacted Stone's legal counsel this morning. Stone has zero awareness the easement was rejected. Sandra showed him manufactured HOA documents making everything appear approved and legitimate. When truth emerges, Stone will demand his $225,000 returned, and Sandra won't possess it. She's already expended at least half on legal fees and consulting expenses for this scheme. I felt grim satisfaction settling. Send me everything. Every email, every document, every filing. I want it organized and presentation ready. Tom agreed. Promised complete file by day's end. After disconnecting, sat at my kitchen table making notes. Sandra's entire scheme depended on convincing people she held legitimate rights to my waterfront. She deceived the HOA about funding, deceived Stone about access rights, deceived the neighborhood about me, and she'd executed it with such conviction that most people simply believed her. But lies only function while they remain hidden. I thought about HOA meeting minutes Tom mentioned. Sandra had employed vague terminology requesting the $16,000, never mentioning the club or Stone or the real money involved. HOA members thought they were funding community amenity. They had zero idea their president was constructing private enterprise on someone else's estate. Truth is patient. It just waits for someone brave enough to expose it. My phone buzzed. Unknown caller. Opened it. Jaw tightening. You made a mistake humiliating me publicly. Back off immediately or face consequences. This is your final warning. No signature needed. Sandra's arrogance saturated every word. She genuinely believed she could intimidate me into submission. Screenshot captured. Forwarded to Tom with note. Add this to evidence file. Then walked outside. Stood on my deck staring at the waterfront one more time. Water was perfectly still, mirroring the morning sky like glass. Sandra Hayes had zero comprehension who she was challenging. She'd selected wrong property, wrong owner, wrong battle. My grandfather had taught me patience fishing here together. He taught me waiting for the perfect moment setting the hook. And when this concluded, everyone would know exactly what kind of person their board president truly was. I just needed waiting for Sandra to take the bait. The emergency HOA assembly was scheduled Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. Discovered through flyer in my mailbox Tuesday afternoon. Urgent community assembly, addressing property conflicts and neighbor disputes. All residents mandatory attendance. Sandra's name at bottom in bold with note about special guest speaker from County Planning Division. Showed Tom over phone. She's escalating. he said, bringing outside authority before you can expose her. Looked at the waterfront. Then I'll give her an audience. Wednesday evening. Twilight settled over water as I locked my door heading to Community Hall. Sky had turned deep violet, crickets beginning their nightly symphony. Thought about my grandfather standing on this same ground 60 years ago, proud of what he'd built. He'd never back down knowing he was right. Neither would I. Parking lot was packed arriving. Counted at least 75 people filtering into building. Inside, folding chairs faced small stage where Sandra stood conversing with a man in bargain suit. She spotted me immediately, expression shifting from animated to frozen. Found seat in back row. Phone out. Recording started. The man was maybe 42. Thinning hair with county identification badge. Sandra stepped to microphone. Thank you all for attending. I know many heard about the unfortunate incident last Saturday. Tonight, I want clarifying the facts. She gestured toward the man. This is David Reynolds from County Planning Division. He's here explaining our waterfront access rights. David cleared throat. Good evening. I've been asked discussing easement law in Texas. Established usage patterns can sometimes create implied easements, especially when communities have utilized resources for extended periods without owner objection. I felt jaw tightening. He was being intentionally vague, creating wiggle room for Sandra's narrative. Sandra jumped back. As many know, residents have enjoyed waterfront access over a decade. When you purchased homes here, you paid premium prices because of that amenity. Now Mr. Brennan wants locking you out and treating you like trespassers. She looked directly at me. Several people turned staring. I kept expression neutral. Phone recording. Older woman raised hand. I've lived here 9 years. My grandkids fish there every summer. Sandra smiled. Exactly. The HOA has consulted legal counsel, and we're prepared filing injunction preserving community access while pursuing formal easement recognition. I'd heard enough. Stood slowly, feeling air shift as chairs creaked and conversations halted. Heartbeat was steady. Room went silent. Ames. Hayes, may I pose a question? Sandra's smile faltered. Of course. This is community forum. Walked to center aisle. Voice calm. You mentioned residents have utilized the waterfront over a decade. Can you display any documentation proving the previous owner granted permission? Sandra's face tightened. The previous owner never objected. Nodded. My uncle owned that estate 42 years. He was a private individual who rarely visited after declining health. Are you claiming people trespassed and because he didn't notice that creates legal standing? Murmuring shifted tone. David Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. Continued. And since you consulted legal counsel, perhaps you can share the outcome of the easement petition you filed with county 3 years ago. The one that was rejected? Sandra's face went crimson. That's not relevant here. Held up phone displaying denial letter. It states here, petitioner has failed demonstrating any legal foundation for easement claim. Property in question remains privately held with zero history of sanctioned public or collective access, signed by Planning Board November 2 years ago. Mr. Reynolds, were you aware of this previous rejection? David looked between Sandra and me. I wasn't briefed on any prior petitions. My role was simply providing general information. Could see him realizing he'd been manipulated. Sandra stepped forward, voice sharp. You're trying confusing people with technicalities. This community has used that waterfront for years. Met her eyes. And I have every right controlling my property. It's called a title deed. County recorded in 1952 when my grandfather purchased that land. No easements. No shared provisions. Just private estate you've been trespassing on. Room erupted. Chairs scraping as people stood demanding answers. Man shouted, wait, we don't actually have legal access? Sandra, you told us this was community property. Sandra raised hands. The situation is more complex than Mr. Brennan is portraying. Looked around room. I don't have problems with this community. I have problems with being deceived and having my estate invaded. If Ames Hayes had approached me respectfully, maybe we could have worked something out. Instead, she called police, threatened me, and is now attempting bullying me before all of you. That's not building community. That's abusing authority. Walked back to my seat. Sandra tried restoring order, but her voice was drowned by demands for documentation and questions about the rejected petition. David slipped out side exit. Finally, Sandra grabbed her materials and stormed off stage, glaring at me. Crowds split visibly, some following her still loyal, others staying behind with confused, angry expressions. Stayed until room emptied, then walked into cool night. Phone buzzed with Tom's text. Well executed. You just put her defensive before her own people. Looked up at stars, feeling grim satisfaction. Sandra had wanted public confrontation. She'd gotten one, but it hadn't proceeded how she'd planned. Some of her neighbors were asking the right questions now, and this was only beginning. Thursday morning at 9 a.m., Tom appeared at my door with 2 file boxes full of documents. You're going to want seeing this, he said, setting them on my kitchen table. I've got complete timeline, and it's worse than we thought. Poured us both coffee and sat down. Tom opened first box and started arranging documents in chronological sequence. Could feel tension thickening with every page. Your grandfather's deed from 1952 is spotless. 4.1 acres. Clear boundaries. No encumbrances. Your uncle inherited it in 1984. Same status. Then 3 years ago, Sandra offered your uncle $16,000 for an easement. He declined in writing. Tom handed me my uncle's response letter. Polite but firm. Thank you for your interest, but I must decline. The waterfront is private family estate, and I wish keeping it that way. Dated March 15th, 3 years ago. 6 months later, Sandra filed the petition with county offices. They rejected it November 2 years ago, stating clearly that trespassing patterns don't create legal rights. She knew she had zero standing. But watch what happened next. Tom pulled out new document set. 2 months after rejection, Sandra held HOA meeting and requested $16,000 for community waterfront access improvements. She told the board that negotiations with property owner were ongoing and funding was needed finalizing access rights. Never mentioned county had already denied her petition. HOA approved funding unanimously. Read through meeting minutes. Sandra had used vague phrases like working toward resolution and pending final approval. She'd stolen $16,000 from HOA dues meant for road maintenance, all while lying about having any legal path to my waterfront. Tom handed me email printouts. 6 months later, she started pitching Richard Stone on the club project. Told him the HOA controlled waterfront access. Perfect for exclusive members only club. Stone was interested immediately. Email chain showed months of planning. Then came the contract. Stone agreed investing $225,000, half upfront, half upon development completion. Sandra established LLC called Riverside Recreation Ventures with herself as managing member. 32% profit share. Stared at the numbers. Sandra had convinced Stone she controlled my estate, taken his money, and planned pocketing $320,000 yearly once operational. Does Stone know about the rejected petition? I asked. Tom's expression darkened. That's the worst part. Sandra provided him with this. He showed me a letter appearing to be from County Planning Board approving the easement request. Letter looked official. Signature looked authentic. My hands actually shook holding it. Forgery was that convincing. She fabricated county documents, Tom said quietly. That's felony document fraud, combined with wire fraud and HOA embezzlement. Sandra's facing serious criminal charges. Set fake letter down carefully. Anger crystallizing into cold determination. Sandra hadn't just deceived her community or defrauded an investor. She'd committed multiple felonies, all constructed on my family's land. What are our options? I asked. Tom leaned back. We could approach police now with fraud evidence. We could contact Stone's attorney and expose the scam. Or we could present everything at next HOA meeting and let her own community see what she's done first. Thought about Wednesday night's meeting. The people who were starting doubting Sandra's story. They'd trusted her for years. Paid dues she diverted. Believed her lies about community rights. They deserved knowing truth before anyone else. Next scheduled meeting is in 2 weeks, I said. Tom nodded. Gives us time organizing everything into airtight presentation. Documents. Timeline. Evidence. We'll make it impossible for her spinning. Looked at boxes filled with proof of 3 years of calculated deception. What about Stone? He's going to lose $225,000. Tom pulled out his phone. Already contacted his attorney this morning. Told him reviewing county records regarding waterfront access. He's calling me back this afternoon. My phone buzzed. Unknown caller. I know what you're attempting. You're making an enormous mistake. Last chance backing off. Show Tom. He photographed the screen. Add it to evidence file. Threatening you via text after everything else. That'll look great before the board. Walked to window and looked out at waterfront. Morning sun was hitting water just right, making it sparkle like diamonds. My grandfather used to say truth was like that waterfront. Clear and constant. You could throw mud in it. Try clouding it up. But eventually everything would settle and you'd see straight through the bottom. Sandra had been throwing mud for 3 years. It was time letting everything settle. Set up presentation. I told Tom, make it comprehensive. Every document, every lie, every dollar. When we're finished, everyone's going to see exactly who Sandra Hayes really is. Tom smiled. This is going to be satisfying. Nodded, still looking at waterfront, just as usually is. That afternoon, Tom called with news. Stone's attorney just got back to me. They pulled county records and realized Sandra's approval letter was fabricated. Stone is threatening suing her personally for fraud and wants attending HOA meeting to confront her directly. Sat down on my deck watching clouds drift over water. This changed everything. Having Stone there, legitimate businessman who lost $250,000 to Sandra's scheme, would make evidence impossible dismissing. Tell him we'll send him date, I said. Tom agreed. This is building into something bigger than just property dispute, Michael. Sandra's entire world is about coming apart. Next morning, Friday at 10 a.m., had unexpected visitor. Helen Martinez stood at my door holding casserole dish. She was 63, retired accountant who'd lived in Lakeview for 16 years. I'd seen her at Wednesday's meeting, sitting third row with concerned expression. Brennan, she said. I hope I'm not intruding. Brought you some chicken enchiladas. Thought you might need friendly gesture after everything that's been happening. Invited her in. Surprised but curious. We sat at my kitchen table, and she got straight to point. I've been treasurer of HOA for 7 years. After Wednesday's meeting, I went home and started reviewing our financial records. Mr. Brennan, something isn't right. Poured her coffee and listened. Feeling not warm in stomach, Helen pulled out folder from her bag. 3 years ago, Sandra requested $16,000 for waterfront access improvements. Board approved it based on her assurance that negotiations with property owner were progressing. But when I look at actual expenditures, I can only account for $9,000. She spread out bank statements and receipts. Sandra claims she spent money on legal consulting and surveying costs. But these receipts don't add up. Some are for amounts that don't match invoices. Others are from companies I can't verify exist. Looked at documents carefully. My 17 years as real estate attorney had taught me spotting financial irregularities. And Helen was right. Paper trail was sloppy, incomplete, deliberate. Where did other $7,000 go? I asked, though already knew answer. Helen shook her head. That's what I want knowing. And there's more. Over past 2 years, Sandra has approved multiple small expenditures without full board votes, always categorized as administrative costs. When I add them up, it's another $13,000 unaccounted for. Felt chest tighten with moral outrage. Sandra hadn't just lied and forged documents. She'd systematically stolen from people who trusted her most. Have you told other board members? I asked. Helen nodded. Called emergency board meeting last night. 3 of 5 showed up. When I presented my findings, they were shocked. We voted suspending Sandra's spending authority pending full financial audit. This was alliance I needed. HOA board members were turning against their own president because evidence was undeniable. Helen, I have documents that might interest you. Evidence that Sandra has been lying about waterfront access situation from very beginning. Showed her county denial letter, emails with Richard Stone, and forged approval document. Helen's face went pale reading through everything. She told us she had approval. She stood before board and said county had given us access rights. Her voice shook. We trusted her. We've been paying dues for years, thinking she was working in our best interest. Kept voice calm. Sandra established private LLC to profit from fishing club development. She was planning taking 32% of all revenue while HOA got nothing. Helen stood and walked to window, staring out at waterfront. I've known Sandra for 11 years. We served on board together, planned community events together. I thought she cared about this neighborhood. She turned back to me. What are you going to do with all this evidence? Explain plan. Present everything at next HOA meeting in 2 weeks. Tom would organize timeline. I'd walk through legal violations. Stone would testify about fraud. And Helen could present financial discrepancies. Make it comprehensive, undeniable, and public. Helen was quiet for a long moment. I want helping. HOA members deserve knowing what she's done. She gathered her documents. I'll get you copies of all financial records, every questionable transaction, and I'll contact other board members who attended last night. If they're willing, we can present united front. After Helen left, sat on my deck and watched afternoon light play across waterfront. 3 days ago, I'd been alone fighting Sandra and her community support. Now I had Tom building legal case, Stone ready testifying, and HOA board members documenting her crimes. Sandra's fortress was cracking from inside. Phone rang. Tom, you're not going to believe this. I just got call from reporter at local newspaper. Someone tipped her off about potential HOA corruption, and she wants investigating. Felt mix of satisfaction and caution. What did you tell her? Tom's voice carried warning edge. Told her attending next HOA meeting. Said it would be story of year. But Michael, this could get messy fast. Once press is involved, there's no controlling narrative. Understood what he meant. We were crossing line from private dispute to public scandal. Sandra made it messy when she forged government documents and stole from her neighbors. I said, we're just making sure everyone knows about it. Tom laughed. Fair enough. I'll keep building case. Hung up and looked at waterfront one more time. Water was perfectly still, reflecting sky like mirror. My grandfather had taught me that when you're fighting for something that matters, you don't fight alone. You build alliances, gather evidence, and let truth speak for itself. Sandra thought she could threaten me into silence. She thought her position and her community support made her untouchable. But she'd forgotten something important. Truth doesn't care about your title or your connections. It just sits there, patient and constant, waiting for someone brave enough shining light on it. And in 2 weeks, that light was going to be blinding. The 2 weeks passed slowly. During that time, 4 more HOA board members reached out privately, apologizing for believing Sandra and offering support. Neighborhood was fracturing, people choosing sides. Some remained loyal to Sandra, convinced I was twisting facts, but more residents were asking questions, demanding seeing documents Sandra claimed having. On meeting morning, Tuesday at 6 p.m., Tom arrived early helping me set up projector, evidence boxes, and timeline poster. Helen brought financial records. Richard Stone flew in from Houston with his attorney, and sitting in back of Community Hall, notebook in hand, was Amy Lawson from local newspaper. By 6:15 p.m., room was packed. 140 people filled every chair, lined walls, spilled out into hallway. I'd never seen this many residents at HOA meeting. Sandra arrived 6:20 with 2 people I didn't recognize. One was woman in expensive suit carrying briefcase. Other was man with slick back hair who looked used to intimidating people. Sandra's reinforcements. She saw projector, evidence boxes, and Richard Stone in 3rd row, and her face went pale, but she recovered quickly, walking to front with manufactured confidence. Good evening, everyone, she said, voice tight. I'm glad so many could attend tonight. Before we begin, I'd like addressing some malicious rumors that have been circulating about me and our community's waterfront access rights. Stood up. Ames. Hayes. I'd like requesting the floor. I have presentation that I believe community needs seeing before any other business is conducted. Sandra's jaw clenched. This is HOA meeting. Mr. Brennan, you're not member. You don't get making demands. Helen stood from her seat on board. Actually, Sandra, I'm invoking my authority as treasurer to call for special presentation regarding financial irregularities. Board voted 4-1 allowing Mr. Brennan speaking tonight. Could see Sandra calculating, realizing she'd already lost control. Woman in expensive suit leaned over and whispered something. Sandra stepped back. Fine, let's get this circus over with. Walked to front and faced crowd. Hands were steady. I'd spent 17 years presenting evidence in courtrooms, and this was no different. My name is Michael Brennan. 3 weeks ago, I inherited a estate that includes 4.1-acre waterfront, Since then, I've been accused of stealing community property. Tonight, I'm going to show you truth. Clicked on first slide showing my grandfather's deed from 1952. This is original deed. Private estate. No encumbrances. No shared access. Next slide. This is survey map showing waterfront sits 250 feet outside HOA boundaries. Walk them through timeline methodically. Could feel tension thickening with every slide. Sandra's offer to my uncle 3 years ago. His written refusal. Her petition to county offices. Official denial. Then came emails with Richard Stone. Room was silent as people read Sandra's promises about controlling waterfront access. Her projections of $320,000 annual profit from fishing club. And her 32% management fee. Ms. Hayes told Mr. Stone that all legal access was secured. She provided him with this document. Displayed forged county approval letter. This document is fake. County never approved any easement. Ms. Hayes fabricated official government documents to defraud investor out of $225,000. Room erupted into overlapping voices. Chairs scraping. People demanding Sandra explain herself. Noise built to crescendo. Then died suddenly as everyone waited for her response. Sandra stood frozen. Face bright red. Continued before she could gather herself. There's more. Ms. Hayes requested $16,000 from HOA funds for waterfront access improvements. Ellen Martinez discovered that only $9,000 can be accounted for. Remaining $7,000 disappeared, along with another $13,000 in unauthorized expenditures. Helen stood and held up financial records. I have documentation of every missing dollar. Sandra approved payments without board votes, submitted false receipts, and diverted community funds for personal use. Richard Stone stood next. My name is Richard Stone. I'm CEO of Stone Development Partners. Ms. Hayes approached my company 19 months ago with proposal developing this waterfront. She provided documents showing HOA had legal access rights. Based on her representations, I invested $225,000. Last week, I learned everything she told me was lie. I've been defrauded, and I'm filing criminal charges. Voices rose again. Overlapping questions and accusations filling space. Sandra was staring at screen where her forged document was displayed for everyone seeing. Finally, she found her voice. This is coordinated attack. Mr. Brennan is manipulating evidence to make me look bad because he wants stealing property that rightfully belongs to this community. Click to next slide. Sandra's threatening text messages appeared on screen. You made mistake humiliating me. Back off now, or you'll regret it. Another message. Last chance backing down before this gets ugly for you. Looked at Sandra. These threats came from your phone number, along with 8 similar messages over past 2 weeks. Would you like claiming those are fake too? Sandra's mouth opened and closed. Man with slicked back hair stood. My client has no further comments. Any questions should be directed to her legal counsel. But it was too late. Man in front row stood. Sandra, is this true? Did you really forge those documents? Woman called out. Where did our $16,000 go? Another voice. You told us we had rights to that waterfront. You lied to all of us. Sandra tried speaking, but her voice cracked. I was working for this community. Everything I did was to protect our property values. Ellen's voice cut through. You stole from us, Sandra. You lied to us for 3 years and used our money lining your own pockets. Sandra grabbed her purse. I don't have to listen to this. She tried walking toward exit, but people filled aisle, blocking her path with their bodies and their questions. Crowd parted slowly, silent now, watching her leave. She shoved through and disappeared outdoor. Man with slick back hair followed her, leaving woman in expensive suit standing alone, looking uncomfortable. Tom stood up. For the record, copies of all evidence presented tonight have been provided to County District Attorney's Office. Ms. Hayes is under investigation for document fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, and criminal trespass. This is now a legal matter. Meeting dissolved into conversations after that. But anger had shifted. People weren't angry at me anymore. They were angry at Sandra for betraying their trust. Several residents approached me to apologize. Others wanted copies of evidence. Amy Lawson was frantically taking notes, walked outside into cool night air, and stood in parking lot. Tom joined me a moment later. Well, he said, that went exactly as planned. Looked up at stars. Justice isn't always satisfying in moment, but it's necessary. Tom nodded. Sandra's finished. HOA will vote her out. Stone will sue her, and DA will probably file charges. She built her whole scheme on lies, and now it's collapsed. Thought about my grandfather, about waterfront he'd worked so hard buying, about legacy he'd left me. All I wanted was protecting my family's estate. Sandra turned it into this. Tom put hand on my shoulder. You did right thing. You gave community truth. What they do with it now is up to them. Stood there in parking lot as people filed out of community hall, their voices carrying in night air. Some were still angry. Some were confused. But all of them knew truth now. And truth, as my grandfather used to say, was only foundation worth building on. 3 weeks after meeting, stood on shore of my waterfront with my 13-year-old nephew, Jake. He'd flown in from Austin to spend spring break with me, and I'd promised teaching him how to fish the way my grandfather had taught me. Morning was cool and quiet, mist rising off water like smoke. Jake cast his line, watched it arc through air, and smiled when it landed exactly where he'd aimed. Uncle Mike, he said, Mom told me you had to fight keeping this place, that people tried taking it from you. Reeled in my own line slowly, thinking about how explaining it. Not exactly take it, Jake. They tried convincing everyone it belonged to them when it didn't. They lied about having permission, forged documents, and stole money from their neighbors. But in the end, truth won. Sandra Hayes was facing criminal charges. District attorney had filed counts of document fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, and criminal trespass. Her attorney was negotiating plea deal, but damage to her reputation was permanent. Richard Stone had filed civil lawsuit for full $225,000 plus damages. HOA had voted unanimously removing her as president and banned her from holding any leadership position in future. Helen Martinez was now serving as interim president, and board had launched full forensic audit of past 5 years of finances. Community was healing slowly, learning to trust again after being deceived by someone they believed in. Several residents had approached me about possibly creating limited access program for waterfront, something structured and legal with proper permissions. I was considering it, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, on my terms, with respect and honesty. Jake caught bass, small but scrappy, and we released it back into water. Grandpa Walt bought this land in 1952. I told him. He worked 2 jobs to afford it. He wanted a place where our family could come, where we could fish and be quiet and remember what matters. Pulled old gate key from my pocket, one my grandfather had used for decades. This key has been in our family for 61 years. Now I'm giving it to you. Pressed it into Jake's hand. Someday this land will be yours. And when people try taking what's yours, you stand your ground, not with anger or violence, but with truth and patience and law. You understand? Jake nodded, closing fingers around key. We fished until noon, then walked back to house. On way, we passed new sign I'd installed at gate. Private estate, Brennan family waterfront, established 1952. Simple, clear, true. That evening, sat on my deck and watched sunset paint water in shades of gold and orange. Phone buzzed with text from Tom. DA officially charged Sandra today. Plea hearing in 2 weeks. Stone's lawsuit is moving forward. Justice served. Smiled and set phone down. Justice served, not through revenge or anger, but through evidence, patience, and courage to stand up when everyone else was sitting down. My grandfather would have been proud. Waterfront was still there, peaceful and constant, exactly as it had always been. And it would be there long after all of us were gone. Reminded that some things are worth fighting for, not because they're valuable, but because they're true. If you believe in standing up for what's right, in using truth instead of force, and in holding people accountable when they abuse power, you're part of something bigger than just this story. Here at HOA Stories English, we share real experiences of people who refused backing down when they were lied to, threatened, or manipulated by those in authority positions. Every story we tell is a reminder that you don't need being loudest person in room to win. You just need being the one telling truth. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and join our community. We're building a place where justice isn't just concept, It's practice. Share your own HOA experiences in comments. Let's hold line together. Because when good people stay silent, bad people stay in power. And we're done being silent. Welcome to HOA Stories English.